March 1943, North Atlantic. Convoys HX 229 and SC 122 fight through heavy seas. In 4 days, 22 merchant ships go down, and more than 300 sailors do not come home. Winston Churchill will later write that the only thing that truly frightened him in the war was the U-boat peril. This is the low point of the Allied Atlantic campaign, and the beginning of the turn. In the next 12 to 15 minutes, we will follow the crisis of March 1943 to the reversal known as Black May, explain what actually changed the odds, and separate well-told myths from the documented record. No drama for its own sake, only what reliable sources support. The Battle of the Atlantic was a logistics war. Britain imported most of its food and all of its petroleum by sea. German U-boats hunted the lifelines. In March 1943 alone, U-boats sank hundreds of thousands of tons of shipping. HX 229 and SC 122 show how dangerous those weeks were. Scattered across the ocean, shadowed by U-boats, escorts stretched thin, long nights when radios stayed silent and hydrophones did the talking. Escorts had sonar, then often called ASDIC. But it worked best when a submarine was directly ahead and submerged. At night, many U-boats attacked on the surface like fast, low silhouettes, slipping around the sonar cone. Air cover was the decisive missing piece. Between North America and Britain, a mid-ocean gap left convoys unprotected from the sky. In March, that gap still existed. Convoys were loud, propellers cavitated, machinery vibrated, sound carried underwater. U-boat hydrophone operators could hear large groups of ships at long ranges under favorable conditions. But here is the key. Hearing a convoy did not guarantee safe attacks. To strike with torpedoes, U-boats still had to close inside the range of sonar, radar, and eyeballs. And in early 1943, Allied tools for those last miles were about to improve. The turnaround in the Atlantic did not come from a single miracle device or a single clever individual. It came from a package of changes: aircraft, ships, sensors, weapons, training, and intelligence, arriving together and reinforcing one another. First, very long-range patrol aircraft, especially consolidated B-24 Liberators with extra fuel, began to close the mid-ocean air gap. A U-boat forced to dive by aircraft loses speed, awareness, and the ability to coordinate. Every hour underwater is an hour not attacking a convoy. Second, escort carriers joined the fight. These small carriers ferried a handful of aircraft, but their effect was outsized. Scouting ahead, driving U-boats down, and pouncing when contacts appeared. Carrier-based planes could loom over convoys far from land, exactly where the gap had been. Third, centimetric radar matured. Short wavelength radar could spot low, wet targets. Periscopes, conning towers, snorkels that older sets missed, especially at night. Paired with Lee lights, powerful searchlights slung under patrol aircraft, radar turned the darkness from a shield into a trap. Fourth, high-frequency direction finding, HFDF, often said Huff Duff, let escorts triangulate U-boat radio transmissions fast enough to intercept shadowers and break up wolf packs before attacks developed. Fifth, new weapons mattered. The ahead-throwing Hedgehog mortar launched a fan of contact-fused explosives in front of an escort, letting ships attack without losing sonar contact in their own depth-charge turbulence. Later in 1943, acoustic torpedoes and homing weapons entered the scene, but in the spring, Hedgehog plus radar and air power were the workhorses. Sixth, intelligence, training, and doctrine caught up. Escorts learned to fight as teams. Support groups, surface hunters not tied to a single convoy, roamed to reinforce threatened formations. Code-breaking contributed warning and context, and the best commanders learned to trust multiple sources at once. Now, back to those March convoys. HX 229 and SC 122 suffered badly. Escorts fought hard but were too few and too thinly supplied with long-range air cover. The lesson was simple and harsh. Without persistent aircraft and better night detection, U-boats could still mass and overwhelm. The shock of March concentrated minds. Resources, airframes, radar sets, carriers, crews, were reallocated with urgency. In late April and early May, convoys like ONS-5 signaled what was about to happen. Escorts used radar, HFDF, Hedgehog, and disciplined tactics to hold off large numbers of U-boats. Weather turned ugly, bad for both sides, but worse for submarines trying to keep contact on the surface. When the seas calmed, escort carriers and liberators were waiting. One convoy did not win the Atlantic, but patterns did. Fewer successful attacks, more submarines damaged or sunk, and more U-boats forced to submerge and lose the initiative. May 1943 is remembered as Black May by the German submarine arm. U-boats suffered record losses. The Allies still lost merchant ships. This war never became easy. But the curve bent. More escorts arrived. More aircraft ranged over the ocean. Wolf packs found themselves detected before they could coordinate. The cost-benefit tipped. Attacks delivered less, and the chances of not returning rose sharply. German command withdrew many boats from the North Atlantic to reconsider tactics and technology. You may hear a good story that a single merchant ship cook in 1943 devised water-filled chambers around machinery, tested them secretly on a corvette, and made convoys silent, changing the war within weeks. It is a compelling tale, but major archives and standard naval histories do not record such a program, and post-war U.S. Navy noise-masking systems used very different methods. The real 1943 turnaround is well documented. Aircraft over the gap, escort carriers, centimetric radar and lee lights, HFDF, ahead-throwing weapons, better training and coordination, and steady pressure that multiplied across every convoy. The victory was cumulative, not magical. For the people aboard, none of that felt abstract. Bridge watches peered into spray and darkness. Hydrophone operators strained for bearings. Pilots droned long hours over gray water, only to drop a flare and see a periscope vanish. Engine room crews kept power on a ship that rose and fell like an elevator. When an attack came, decisions were seconds long. Turn toward the threat, throw a pattern, light the night, and keep formation tight enough to protect but loose enough to maneuver. After Black May, the Allies tried not to relax. More convoys received well-trained escort groups. Support groups hunted between convoys. Air patrols became routine across routes once uncovered. U-boats experimented with new torpedoes, snorkels, and tactics, and the battle continued into 1944 and 1945. But the clean window of opportunity that existed in early 1943 did not come back. The ocean, once a hunting ground, had become a defended corridor. The Atlantic campaign shows how logistics win wars or lose them. It also shows how solutions rarely arrive as a single breakthrough. They arrive as a package. Technology that works with tactics, doctrine that uses intelligence, leaders who learn, and crews who endure. If there is a single hero in this story, it is the system that finally came together, and the thousands of ordinary people who made it work. Key terms you may hear again in future episodes. Convoy. Groups of merchant ships sailing together with naval escorts. Wolf pack. Groups of U-boats coordinating attacks on a convoy. ASDIC or sonar. Active sound detection used by escorts. Early sets were forward-looking and had limits. HFDF. Huff Duff. Radio direction finding to locate U-boat transmissions. Centimetric radar and lee light. Night detection and illumination from aircraft. Hedgehog. a head-throwing anti-submarine mortar. Very long-range patrol aircraft, especially B-24 Liberators with the range to close the mid-ocean gap. Escort carriers. Small carriers providing air cover far from land. Black May. May 1943, when U-boat losses peaked and the momentum shifted. For deeper dives, look for credible sources such as the U.S. Naval History and Heritage Command overviews of the Atlantic Campaign, the Imperial War Museum's guides, U-boat.net's convoy and loss records, and R.V. Jones's memoir, Most Secret War for the Radar and Radio War in Europe. For a broader narrative, consult recent academic histories of the Battle of the Atlantic that integrate intelligence, air power, and escort doctrine. March 1943 showed how close the Atlantic lifeline came to breaking. May 1943 showed how quickly the odds can change when the right tools, training, and ideas arrive together. That is the month the ocean turned from a hunting ground into a guarded highway, and the month the Allied war effort could breathe again. That was the month the ocean turned from a hunting ground into a guarded highway, and the month the Allied war effort could finally breathe again. If you enjoyed learning about this turning point in the Atlantic, please consider subscribing for more untold stories from World War II. Leave a comment with what surprised you most, and share this episode with someone who loves real history. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next story.